In today's class, we are going to look at the application of differential calculus and economics. We are given that if TR, which is total revenue, is equals to 6Q plus 2Q squared, find the derivative of TR from the first principle. Okay? Now, we've been given the total revenue function as this. We are asked to differentiate this function using the first principle. Let me remind you of your basics differentiation. First principle is one of the methods of differentiating a function. Look at this. Let's say we are given that y is equals to x squared, and we are asked to find the derivative of this function using the first principle. The first principle works on the basics of increment. You understand? That is, we are going to increase the independent variable by delta x. There will also be a corresponding increment in the dependent variable by delta y. You understand? That is, increase x by delta x. There will also be a corresponding increment in y by delta y. The meaning of that statement is that I'm going to add anywhere I see delta x, anywhere I see x in equation 1. Let me call this equation 1. Call this equation 1, okay? Equation 1. Anywhere I see x in equation 1, I'm going to add x plus delta x. And anywhere I see y in equation 1, I'm going to add y plus delta y. Do you understand? Okay, let's proceed. For this, I'm going to have y plus delta y, because y is here, is equals to x plus delta x raised to the power of 2. Do you understand? Okay, so now let us expand the right hand side of the equation. I'm going to have y plus delta y is equals to x plus delta x, x plus delta x. Do you understand how I got this? If you have a plus b squared, if you have a plus b raised to the power of 2, this is what? A plus b. You understand? That's what I did. I just expand the bracket. Okay, let's proceed. For this, I'm going to have y plus delta y is equals to x multiply x, that is x squared. X multiply delta x, that is plus x delta x. Delta x multiply x, that is plus x delta x. Delta x multiply delta x, that is plus delta x squared. Please, do you understand how I got this and how I expand the bracket? It is very simple, okay? You just have to pay attention, okay? To expand this bracket, this x will multiply all the contents inside the second bracket, okay? This also will multiply all the contents inside the second bracket. You understand? That's why I got this. X times x, x squared. X times delta x, x delta x. Delta x times x, x delta x. Delta x times delta x squared. Do you understand? Okay? Let us proceed. Now, is there any like term? Yes, there is. I'm going to have y plus delta y is equals to x squared plus, because we can add both together. So I'm going to have 2x delta x plus delta x squared. Please, the reason why I take you through this is just to remind you of your basics differential calculus, so that by the time I started solving this question, it will not feel strange. Okay? Now let's pay attention here. We have gotten to this point. The next step is that we are going to make delta y the subject of the relation. So I'm going to have delta y. Oh, sorry, let me change this marker. I'm going to have delta y is equals to, I'm going to move y to the other side of the equation. So I'm going to have delta y is equals to x squared plus 2x delta x plus delta x squared minus y. Because when this y crosses the equals to sign, the positive sign will change to what? Negative sign. No. Now look at this. Don't forget that y is what? X squared from equation 1. Y is equals to x squared. So I'm going to substitute the value of y as x squared here. So I'm going to have delta y is equals to x squared plus 2x delta x plus delta x squared minus x squared, because y is equals to x squared from equation 1. So now I have minus x squared, I have positive x squared. This x squared will cancel this x squared. Do you understand? So I'm left with what? Delta y is equals to 2x delta x plus delta x squared. Please, if you didn't understand this, you might not understand how I'm going to use this first principle to differentiate the total revenue function that we are given. So I beseech you to pay attention. And if you wish to understand more about first principle, you can check the link in the description of this video. I have some solution on this particular subtopic in differential calculus. Okay, now the next step here is that we are going to divide both sides by delta x. So I'm going to have delta y over delta x, this one over delta x, and this also over delta x. Do you understand? So this delta x will cancel this delta x. For this, I have 2 delta x. Just like saying that a times a over a. You understand? A times a is what? X squared over a. So 1a will cancel 1a. So I'm left with what? A. Just like this. So delta x squared over delta x, that will give me delta x. So I'm left with what? Delta y over delta x is equals to 2x plus delta x. Do you understand? Delta x squared is this. Delta x squared is equals to delta x times delta x. Okay, and if you divide it by delta x, 1 delta x will cancel 1 delta x. So I'm left with what? 1 delta x. Now, we have gotten to this point. What is the next step? We are going to limit delta x as it tends to 0. You understand? So I'm going to have the y over the x. The y over the x, lim delta x as it tends to 0. Do you know the meaning of this statement? That is, anywhere I see delta x in this equation, I'm going to replace it as 0. You understand? Anywhere I see delta x in this equation, I'm going to replace it as 0. So I'm going to have 2x plus 0. So dy over dx is equals to 2x. So the derivative of this function is 2x. Now, let us go back to our question. Now, with this step, we are going to use the same step to take the derivative of the total revenue function that we are given. Now, let us use the same approach to solve this question. Don't forget, the first step is that we are going to increase q by delta q. There will also be a corresponding increment in tr by delta tr. You understand? Just like I did for this when I want to differentiate this. Okay, we are going to increase q by delta q. There will also be a corresponding increment in tr by delta tr. That means that anywhere I see, call this equation 1. Equation 1. That means that anywhere I see q in equation 1, I'm going to substitute q plus delta q. And anywhere I see tr in equation 1, I'm going to substitute tr plus delta tr. Do you understand? So let us proceed. For this, I'm going to have tr plus delta tr is equals to 6 into bracket q plus delta q plus 2 into bracket q plus delta q squared. Delta q squared. Do you understand? Because I have q squared now. So I replace it with q plus delta q squared. I have q. I replace it with q plus delta q. Do you understand? Okay, let us proceed. Now, tr plus delta tr is equals to 6 multiplied by q, that is 6q. 6 multiplied by delta q, that is plus 6 delta q, plus 2 into bracket. Now let us expand this bracket. I'm going to have q plus delta q, then q plus delta q. Please, do you understand how I got this? If you didn't understand, learn the basic rules of expansion. Okay? Now, let's pay attention. tr plus delta tr is equals to 6q plus 6 delta q plus 2 into bracket. Now, let us expand. This q will first multiply all the content inside this bracket. You understand? So I'm going to have q multiplied by q. That is q squared. Okay? This same q multiplied by delta q. That is plus q delta q. Plus q delta q. Delta q. Do you understand? This q will first multiply all the content inside the second bracket. You understand? So I'm going to have q multiplied by q, q multiplied by delta q. So for this, I'm going to have q squared plus q delta q. Now the next step is that I'm going to multiply this delta q also. This delta q will multiply all the content inside the bracket. Let's start with q. Delta q multiplied by q, that is plus q delta q. Okay, plus This delta q will also multiply this delta q. Then I'm going to have plus delta q squared. Just like I did when I want to expand this bracket, you understand? So let us proceed. For this, I'm going to have tr plus delta tr is equals to 6q plus 6 delta q plus 2 into bracket q squared plus, now you can see that we can connect like terms because we have q delta q and q delta q. So I'm going to have 2q delta q, 2q delta q, just like I have in this place 2x delta x, 2q delta q plus delta q squared. Please just pay attention. You are going to understand this. It is very simple. Okay, now I'm going to have tr plus delta tr is equals to 6q plus 6 delta q plus, yeah, open the bracket with 2. 2 multiplied by q squared, that is 2q squared. 2 multiplied by 2q delta q, that is plus 4q delta q. Okay, plus 4q delta q. 2 multiplied by delta q squared, that will be plus 2 delta q squared. Please, do you understand how I got here? If you didn't understand, kindly reverse the video and watch it again. Okay, let's proceed. For this, I'm going to have tr plus delta tr is equals to, now is there any like term? Is there any like term here? We have 2q squared. There is no like term. So let's proceed. For this, I'm going to have 6q plus 6 delta q plus 2q squared plus 4q delta q plus 2 delta q squared. The next step is that I'm going to make delta r the subject of the relation. Don't forget that when I got here, I make delta y the subject of the relation. So in this place also, I'm going to make delta r, okay? Not delta y now. Delta r the subject of the relation. So I'm going to move the tr, I'm going to move it to the other side of the equation like I did for y. Okay? So let us proceed. For this, I'm going to have delta tr is equals to 6q plus 6 delta q plus 2q squared plus 4q delta q plus 2 delta q squared minus tr. Okay. Do you understand how I got here? Okay, let's proceed. For this, I'm going to have delta tr is equals to 6q plus 6 delta q plus 2q squared plus 4q delta q plus 2 delta q squared minus, okay, don't forget that tr is equals to 6q plus 2q squared. Okay, so I'm going to substitute the value of tr as 6q plus 2q squared. So I'm going to have minus 6q plus 2q squared. Please pay attention. Okay, just pay attention. You are going to understand it. tr is what? 6q plus 2q squared. Having made the delta r the subject of the formula, I move this tr to the other side of the equation. So this negative sign is here. The value of tr in equation 1 is 6q plus 2q squared. That's why I substitute. I have not done anything. Okay? So let's proceed. For this, I'm going to have delta tr is equals to 6q plus 6 delta q plus 2q squared plus 4q delta q plus 2 delta q squared minus, you can see, negative multiplied by positive 6q. That will be give me negative 6q. Negative multiplied by positive 2q squared. That will give me negative 2q squared. Do you understand? So now, look at this. I want you to pay attention. You can see that we have 6q here. We have positive 6q. And we have negative 6q. So this will cancel this. We have positive 2q squared. And we have negative 2q squared. This will also cancel this. So we have left with what? Delta tr is equals to 6 delta q plus 4q delta q plus 2 delta q squared. This is what we have left with. Now the next step is that, like I did in this place, I divide both sides by what? Delta x. Now I'm going to divide both sides by delta Q. Do you understand? So I'm going to have delta TR all over delta Q. All over delta Q. This all over delta Q. All over delta Q. All over delta Q. Okay? So I'm going to have delta TR all over delta Q is equals to this delta Q will cancel this delta Q. So I'm left with 6 plus this delta Q we also then cancel this delta Q. So I'm left with what? 4Q plus, now we have delta Q squared. Don't forget, delta Q squared simply means delta Q times delta Q. You understand? So delta Q squared over delta Q, that is what? Delta Q times delta Q divided by delta Q. So I'm left with what? Delta Q. Just like if I have something like this, I just express this. I express this here, okay? So I'm left with 2. Let me change the marker, okay? I'm left with 2 delta Q. That will be 2 delta Q, okay? So now, the next step is that I'm going to limit delta Q as it tends to 0, okay? So I'm going to have the TR all over the Q. Are you paying attention? Lim delta Q as delta Q tends to 0. You understand? So I'm going to have 6 plus 4Q plus 2 into bracket 0. That's the meaning of that statement as I described earlier when I'm taking the derivative of y is equals to x squared, that delta y over delta x, the y dx lim delta x as it tends to 0 means that is anywhere I see delta x, I'm going to represent as 0. So anywhere I see delta q, I'm going to represent it as what? 0. You understand? The TR all over the Q is equals to 6 plus 4Q. That is the final answer. And you can also check your answer using the polynomial rule. Yeah, trust you learned in this video. Please, I did like you to give this video a thumb like and also drop comments, subscribe, and also share it with your friends, okay?